Hello, world, and welcome back to Practicing Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. My name's Sarah, and I'm here with my friend Lizelle. And today we're going to be talking about episode 24, which is called Hegel. And so I'm going to pass it over to Lizelle to get us started with a quote.
Hello, world. I'm going to read something from Hegel, from his The Phenomenology of Mind. I'm not sure what I'm going to read. Sarah and I just did a game at the beginning, and we'll see. Okay. That the truth is only realized in the form of system, that substance is essentially subject, is expressed in the idea which represents the absolute, capital A, as spirit, capital S, Geist. The grandest conception of all, and one which is due to modern times and its religion. Spirit is alone reality, capital R. It is the inner being of the world, that which essentially is, and is per se. It assumes objective, determinate form, and enters into relations with itself. It is externality, otherness in brackets, and exists for self. Yet, in this determination and in its otherness, it is still one with itself. It is self-contained and self-complete, in itself and for itself at once. The self-containedness, however, is first something known by us. It is implicit in its nature, Ansicht. It is substance spiritual. It has to become self-contained for itself, on its own account. It must be knowledge of spirit and must be consciousness of itself as spirit.
Something that really kept coming up for me about Hegel and just like the understanding of this episode, which was admittedly very difficult to understand. Like there was a lot of rewinding that we both kind of were talking about, having to listen to this one over and over. And so in that, like what you just read, there's something about the hubris of Hegel, like that we also keep returning to. But interestingly enough, it seems like he's saying something that's something we all possess. So it wasn't, not to say that he wasn't like up on his high horse about his discovery, but interesting that he's almost saying that everybody has that, or at least
I
that's
think
how I interpreted it.
I think he would say, because everyone participates in the unfolding of history, but the telos of this unfolding is the self-realization of this process. So the process coming to see itself.
Yeah, and so
And
that's
that
where
is
he
where he,
comes in.
yes,
Yeah, exactly. It's like, well, I'm the one that did it.
my eyes, it's my eyes. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, I love that. That was actually a really great setup and kind of
Yeah.
like reflective of the whole process of going through this episode, I will say. This is one you actually have to sit down and watch and probably take notes and probably rewind to actually get, unless of course people have the frame of coming to this with philosophy understanding or whatever. Like I think that it might sink in just like the biology episodes I just walk right into with
Mhm.
Aristotle. So if you're somebody that studies philosophy, this might just click, but for us plebes, it did not come through very quickly or easily.
Yeah, I wanted to say, well, the philosophy students are going to have it difficult in like 2 weeks' time when we get to neuroscience or cognitive science. But we will too, because neither of us have degrees in cognitive science. So
Yep. Yep.
let's not rub it in too much.
Yes, we're leaving the realm of what I will know very quickly.
Well, maybe it's actually closer to biology, though, cognitive science. I think there is elements of biology
Perhaps,
in it for sure.
perhaps
So we'll see.
developmental psychology and things like that. So yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, there might be some elements but even I mentioned last time the schemas and Piaget, because I did educational psychology, and what I found out through further research, and I was told Lizelle this beginning, is that Piaget was heavily influenced by Kant. And So because Piaget was French, a lot of his translations of schemas from Kant was turned into the word scheme, which isn't what he meant. But he kind of played with it later and like redeveloped the idea around it from what I understood. But interesting that I had no idea Kant influenced Piaget. And you'd see this lineage, obviously, but yeah, that was a interesting discovery. Oh, ready to get
Again, I
into
think Kant influenced almost everyone that followed him. So if someone is born after Kant, I assume you can assume that they were influenced by him in some
yeah.
way.
Yeah, yeah. It was funny to like see it directly though, because I searched the
Yeah,
word schema and it was like
yeah,
Kant, and I was like, no.
yeah. My intuition was right. In other words, you thought, like, yeah, you must have thought. Yeah.
Okay. So getting into this episode by way of the old episode, as we usually do, the last time we were talking about those historical developments around Kant, Schopenhauer, and Nietzsche. And then, like, the big takeaway from Nietzsche was that nice, succinct sentence that you had.
He wanted to save radical self-transformation and make it applicable in the scientific worldview. That's kind of John referred to him again as a prophet of the meaning crisis. Someone I think who saw a way, at least a glimpse of how we can save ourselves or how
Mm-hmm.
we can salvage this self-transformation that is required of if we want to have meaningful existences.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Nietzsche.
Okay. And then in this episode, he says we go back to Kant, and but that's very brief. This return to Kant. It's mainly to contrast Kant, I think, with Hegel and also the Romantics, or Hegel with the Romantics as well.
Yeah. Hegel was one of the people that was like deeply influenced by Kant, but then as an antithesis type of thing, and he was also influenced by the Romantics. So he took. I think so. I think that's what my notes mean. Like, yeah. So he basically took them and he said, no, that can't be. Like, the ding aan zich, or the thing in itself, uh, can't be the irrational, and it can't be unknowable, and that is because, and that is where I mentioned where I finally found a copy of the book that John recommends here. Thinking Being Introduction to Metaphysics in the Classical Tradition by Eric Depot. Unfortunately, a digital copy, so I can't show it. Amazing book. I'm super deeply falling in love with Neoplatonism by reading it. And it's just like, it just jumped out of me, this when he talked about, because I read it first and then I watched this episode for the first time again. And this something that cannot be known, cannot be. That's basically, if it's unknowable, it means it isn't. Parmenides even started with this. He had a vision where he went to a goddess, I think, and she showed him. She just said something like, "There's two ways: the way of knowing what is, and the way of not knowing not what it is not." It's like, and you can't follow the second because that is just not. If something is not, you cannot know it, and if something is, you can know it. That's the
Mm.
most important thing. So if
Mm.
something is, you can know it. So the ground of being is the inexhaustible fount of intelligibility, as John likes to say. And that is something Hegel is picking up here. It's like it has to be, and we have to be able to know it for it to be.
Yeah, that's really interesting. The thing in itself is unknowable and therefore equivalent to non existent. If there is no thing in itself, then reality is just bound to the structure of framing, which we're going to go into a little bit more here. But yeah, like if it is unknowable, then it can't be,
Yeah.
which is interesting. Like, because when you frame it that way, people are gonna, there's like a lot of different ways that you can be like, well, I don't know this, and so it is, but But it's like that's the Geist coming in too. It's not an individual kind of knowing.
You know, uh, it's it's knowable in itself. Uh, it's so I think that's why the intelligibility of being is more important to emphasize. It's not that what a person needs to know it for it to be, or it
Mm-hmm.
means that someone can actually know it. It's just it is knowable in itself.
Mm-hmm.
That is the importance. And if you say something isn't knowable, the only thing that is not knowable is nothing or no thing, which of course takes you to in a very different direction for religious purposes, which is also beautiful. But um, being is grounded in intelligibility, and intelligibility means able to be known. So
Love it. Okay. And I don't want to like sit on that too long because it's like when you're spelling a word and then you start to question like, am I putting it in the right order? There's a little bit of mystery of how that happens. But yeah, so that's kind of the sense that I'm getting is like I grasp it and I'm just gonna need to let that one soak in. So um so for Hegel, rational is what's real.
yes, not the irrational, and that's the him saying no to the romantics, which is like the
Mm,
more irrational you become, the closer you become to reality, to being in touch with reality. And he said, no, the rational is what's really real.
nice. Okay. And that being known, the being and being known book that you were just talking about, that's what I have referenced here too, the sensing something as real and how knowable it is to us. And then Hegel weds the Platonic idea of the thing in itself. Therefore, the mind is making structures of reality, which differs from Kant in that it's not just the experience of reality, it is reality.
Yeah. We don't project reality onto the outer world. We actually pick up the reality and realize it. But that's the player, and I read it here in one of John's 5 favorite books, Religion and Nothingness. And he often refers to realize as uh, um, getting to know. I can't remember the right word, but uh, having insight into, or but then the or that he uses is the Latin sive, which is the same as that Spinoza uses when he says God or nature. It doesn't mean like this or this. It means you can see it whichever way you want to see it. You can see it as this, or you can see it as this. That's what that all means. So it's either realizing as in you have an insight, you get it, you understand it, or realizing as in you make it real. That is the
Yeah.
way to refers realize, and that's pretty cool. I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially with in this context of participating. So coming into reality, and also it can be something we experience. We realize it as we experience it, then we also realize that it's coming into reality
Yeah,
through this vessel.
yeah. The patterns of intelligibility, because he keeps using. We realize the patterns of intelligibility.
Yeah.
That is what we are realizing.
Okay. Okay. I have a lot on that the mind makes frames to understand reality. So just more on this. As for the romantics, Hegel understands the irrational part are a developmental potential for rationality. Rationality hasn't yet fully developed.
Yeah. So yeah, he doesn't see the irrational as the really real. He sees it as the potential, the unactualized reality.
Nice. We aren't talking about individual minds. This is the extended mind. So we're moving into Geist now. And I like that you have this word natively. And so that's why I was interested in hearing how it also, what it means to you particularly.
The system of patterns of intelligibility, the living system, which is the Geist. And then he says it's mind. Geest is like mind or spirit. And I think, like the book that I read from has mind in it. So I'm wondering if that is in the German, the phenomenology of Geist. Could very well be. So I know the Geist. It's for us. It's Geest, which is basically the same. I think is also the Geest of the party or of this environment. So it's also kind of the spirit of the party, but then in the atmosphere, the whole feel of, and you can catch the spirit like you catch spirit. You geestfang. It's to get excited, like enthusiastic. Is like geestfang. So which is also of course enthusiastic, being full of God. So it's also that. So it's a very rich word indeed. And if we want to tell ghost stories, because spirit, ghost, we talked about that, and geest could also be a disembodied spirit. In other words, a ghost. But if we tell ghost stories, we'll seldom talk of geest. We will use spook. So there's a different word for that. So that's not necessarily what we have in mind then. But it's a whole feel, a whole atmosphere, a whole die geest van die tyd, we would say, the geist of the time.
So yes, okay. So that was what I had on that part. And then okay, so then Geist as it relates with history. Because you said this is like the how or something like that.
Yeah. How do you study it? How do you see this geist? How does it manifest itself? And then he says you see it in the unfolding of history. So this is one of his other books. And I think he has a book, I might be wrong, but I've got the philosophy of history, but I think he also has the history of philosophy. So, which is cute.
Oh,
I
I
think it's
love
really
that, man.
cute.
Oh, that went fine with that one. So my bad. Hold on. Like a big situation here. It's also because it reflects on the camera, so I don't know which way I'm actually going. I have to feel, not look. I can't. Yeah.
That is very platonic, because that's one of the things that, no, really, it's like,
I know it.
I was just reading in this amazing book how most of the time people see like our main way of knowing is through seeing. Like, oh, I see it, means you get it, you understand.
I
But Plato is
see.
so full of other ways of expressing how we know. It's like that da'af comes back so much by incorporating, by eating, and very much also by making love, or the word sun usia, which I've, being with, is a way of knowing. It's and being with, of course, I mean, we, even in our language, that can mean a lot of things. I'm with someone. I'm being with that person at the moment can mean a lot of things. It can mean you're dating. It can mean you're making love. It can mean a lot of things. So, and it's the
Yeah.
same way that Plato. So that da'af way, because don't think John actually ever mentions that it's in Plato. He just doesn't, of course, use the Hebrew word. He just uses sunusia. Like, and it
Then
started with you saying like you have to feel your way. You can't
yeah,
see.
exactly. Okay. And then, so what we were getting at there was how the Geist develops much like a child develops over time, we would assume. And so that's how we're getting into this. How to understand Geist is to look back at history, because over time, Geist has developed. So the history is the process by which reality and our understanding of reality are co-unfolding together.
Mhm.
And because history provides us with various worldviews, cultural sense making, and grammars for sense making, and we can see the patterns.
Mm.
they are realized. And yeah, this kind of describes, or he's exploring this idea of how humans create worlds of intelligence, of intelligible patterns in which we can act in a meaningful way and understand ourselves, the world, and each other.
Mhm. I
And
do want to mention here, because I think if I wait until Kierkegaard, it's not going to make sense.
okay.
That's my critique of Kierkegaard's critique. I see in, and everyone else has like, yeah, but there's no way to participate in Hegel's philosophy or the system, the house he created or the castle he created and then sat next to. But there is, I see a way to participate exactly here. It's,
Go on. Creating worlds, right?
yeah, like by consciously realizing the patterns of intelligibility and as a group, not just as an individual, but as a group.
Mm.
That's for me a way to. But I'm sure it's because I don't really understand Hegel.
True. Exactly. Okay. So that's the thing. It's like, yes, but I see it too. I say exactly what you're seeing, because what we said kind of in the end of our summary in the beginning was it's so funny how the other philosophers are participating in what Hegel said exactly they would do. So in
Yeah,
that sense of producing an antithesis to his thesis,
yeah,
everybody's coming to this higher
yeah.
synthesis.
Synthesis. Yeah,
It's happening.
yeah.
Maybe he did predict the future, but
Well,
it's
he saw the real
not.
pattern.
Yes,
He saw the real
exactly.
pattern, and if you see a real pattern, it's gonna keep playing out.
Hmm.
And that's
It's
like,
funny that it was the meta pattern that he saw, because you can look back at history and see patterns
mm,
easily, okay,
yeah,
that repeated itself, that repeated itself. But to look back and say, all right, but what is repeating, and to say, oh, it's this, okay, because we're getting into it, differentiation, integration, and systemization. He sees
yeah,
those patterns,
yeah,
but the big pattern of it.
yeah.
So
It's
that's
it's
the pick.
actually I'm actually in awe of Hegel at the moment because
Right.
it's like that's kind of what we strive towards, right? To see the deep, deep patterns.
Yep.
That's what we want to see.
So it's funny to think of the Geist as it really, of course, it's gone throughout history, but then it gets going through the scientific revolution and the Protestant Reformation here, and and then it starts to take on this
Yeah,
secular nature, because it's
yeah,
developing into that. And then, oh, but it's so beautiful, this structure of the scientific method, because we wouldn't have, I couldn't talk to you.
yeah,
Like there's
yeah,
so much to that amazing, yeah,
yeah,
uh well, what, discovery, yeah,
yeah.
I don't know,
Process.
process, yeah,
Yeah, way of knowing.
way of
I think
knowing.
science is a way of knowing.
So let's get into it, because we were just talking about how to historically understand the
Yeah,
development of the Geist, and that
and
is,
then you mentioned a lot of things that
yeah.
exactly what it is. But
A lot of things we've already talked about, but maybe haven't like fully laid out for, yeah,
yeah,
whatever the viewer is going through. So me in the future. um Differentiation, which is grasping differences, distinguishing, clarity, contrast, articulation, and finding the joints, which is a cool,
mhm,
yeah, way of thinking about it.
mhm.
So the differentiation, recognizing this, there, that, yeah, taking an idea and, I don't know, seeing the full spectrum of it, seeing the poles of it, or something like that, contrasting and distinguishing and discerning.
Discerning is maybe, yeah, because the example, I'm not going to say the exact example, but you used a really good example that you have to take apart things to see what is really this and what is really that. So
Yep.
something that's been confused needs to be taken apart so that you can see this is this and this is not this. So that's differentiation. It's
Yeah, it's such a biology move, because this plant is not that, because it has these. And so we can
Mhm.
group things by what they are, but also by what they are not.
So the way I see it, I also actually see Jung in this. Like Jungian therapy, I think is also a lot about differentiation and reintegration. We talked about the fact that this is so alchemical. This is alchemy. Like differentiation, integration.
Mhm.
In alchemy, what happens is you take it apart and then it's cleansed, and then it's being reintroduced in a purer way, and but also um, maybe a truer way. Maybe the word is to use is a truer way, a more real way. Maybe Hegel will say a more way according to reason, a more reasonable way. But yeah, it's that, like taking apart and then bringing back together, but now without the confusion.
Uh-huh.
It's
Okay. Okay. Because, yeah, that's because then there's systemization of it actually being brought back together in this
yeah,
more holistic and maybe reasonable way for the
yeah. This is the process,
understanding.
according to, if I understand correctly, this is the process of systemization, the differentiation and integration is the
So that really does set up the machinery for what Hegel just like finds about internal development of the Geist. So he thought he
yeah.
saw this machinery, I guess, well, it might be an okay word to use here, of the idea, the counter idea, and then the higher integration of those concepts, those differing ideas.
Like a living thing, his John says explicitly. So machinery in this, maybe some sort of autopiosis going on here, like self-creation, um, yeah.
Okay, and then these words, they really map well onto thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. Like that.
I like idea,
Yeah.
counter idea, and higher
Yeah.
integration. I like that more than the
Thesis,
other. Yeah,
antithesis, and synthesis.
yeah,
Um, but it's cool how that like it develops the Geist. So the synthesis of those ideas is the Geist developing, and then you just go to okay, now counter idea,
yeah,
synthesis. Okay,
yeah.
now
It
counter
becomes the
idea,
new, yeah.
synthesis. A method was discovered here with Hegel. Um, so if this is a process by which rationality realizes itself, and the real is the rational, this is also a process by which reality realizes itself.
And as I've mentioned again, this book, um, reality realizing itself is religion, according to Nietzsche Tani. And John loves that as well. And then he adds, although I saw it now in Hegel as well, for its own sake. And he always says he gets it from D.C. Schindler. But I just saw it in Hegel. The passage we read, he kept saying for its own sake, for its own sake. So I
That's like
think,
my Kant discovery with Piaget.
yeah,
Actually, it goes further. It goes further back.
yeah, it
The
always goes,
Geist, that part of the Geist was actually already present. It just hadn't
yeah.
fully developed.
Which is the only objection I have to that beautiful quote that John has, which starts from, I am the first one to have this idea. I always think it's not possible actually to have an original idea. It's always made out of some ingredients.
Mm-hmm.
And it was probably stated all before, but just in different words and in a different way. That's, yeah,
Yeah.
that's how I feel. Like, I mean, even he himself, if he thinks everything is idea, contra idea, and higher integration, he has to see his idea as at least a higher integration, but it's based on some previous ideas and contra ideas. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm going to say the big quote now. This process at work in and through us and in and throughout history by which reality and rationality have realized themselves is God.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Hegel takes the Hebrew idea that we create the world with God, because that whole idea of the narrative,
Mm-hmm.
and the philosophical way of talking about history to secularize Hebrew heritage. This God is secularized, non religious. This God has been realized through contemplations of a philosopher.
Mm-hmm. And specifically Hegel.
So Hegel sees God for the first time.
But like I said, I think before recording, the one kills the universe, the other one realizes God for the first time. Like, philosophers are pretty impressive people.
Oh God. Like imagine just God sitting there like, oh, you can see me.
I've been realized.
It's like this whole time, like been knocking on the mirror. Wait, you can see me?
Hegel thought there was a telos, a direction of development, and it was this self-realization of this idea, like coming face to like God, like, wait, you can see me? That idea.
Yeah.
That's like, I can see myself. I can see myself because you can see me. That's the what it comes down to. And that's the only thing that I can pick up that's like definitely not John. Like the idea that there's a telos to the unfolding of history. Uh, but like a
Yeah.
new religion.
Okay. Understanding moves to reason. And we have capital U, capital R. And I couldn't help but say you are. And you were like, you are what? Because it sounds like Youare. Um, yeah. And then it's just like you are, as in to be or not to
Mm.
be.
That's funny because when you said like what was the original idea, the words that came to me, and I don't mean it I, like Lizelle, I am, because that's how God first identified himself. I am
The original
what I
idea.
will be. It says we translate
All
it
of
as
the
I am what I am.
things.
But there's like just
Wow.
I am. But we are two Aries, and I am is also
Yeah.
Aries. So we will see that. We will see that.
Everywhere. That is the original idea, right?
But you are and I am is so closely connected.
Conjugation of be has been coming up a lot in this.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
be. Yeah. Oh, well, that's getting us into the being mode at least. So
Uh-huh. So the understanding becomes our reason. And this is, he's saying as, so this is kind of like a simile, understanding reason as mythology, philosophy. So this mythology needs to, yeah, a new mythology is being developed, and
mm.
philosophy is its name.
Yeah, as understanding becomes reason, like parallel to that, mythology becomes philosophy.
Nice.
That's what's happening there.
And then, yeah, because like the myth, of course, the one that
Yeah.
he's going to discuss
Yes.
is like
The one
father and
that you
son.
refer to. Yeah. That you did yourself as well.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
like mapping this language. So father, the unarticulated, the unactualized, the undifferentiated, where the son is the antithesis or the counter idea to that. And that's um what in the world?
Articulation.
Incarnation. Okay, that's the word that I wrote. Incarnation
Articulation.
and
Articulation.
articulation.
But
Yeah.
incarnation is
The
correct
son
because
would
he's the
be the,
incarnation.
yeah,
And
the
I wrote in brackets, he's the logos. We know the sun as the logos, and that's also very interesting here
antithesis.
because logos is that
Oh,
pattern, that structure. So it's like the articulation in the through the logos. That's really beautiful.
that is really beautiful. And then the reconciling into the higher integration. And was that what he said was the Holy Spirit? I didn't catch what he
No,
said Holy
they are
Spirit was.
they are reconciled, realization of differentiation and integration, and then that indeed the higher integration is the Holy Spirit, the Geist.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really cool. That's really cool because it's almost like that relationship of the father and son is the guy's like how it is. I mean, because there's probably lower integration too, but that higher integration of their relationship with each other.
Mm.
And that gets into, for me, that bringing in Mary or like the body, and not necessarily like that would be like the integration with Holy Spirit being able to um be a Geist here in that sense of the community, coming together, and their participation with one another is what forms that Geist
Mm,
of the reconciliation of the Father and the Son.
mm.
But that's just my own, yeah,
Yeah, I don't,
interpretation.
but I think this might be a Catholic versus Protestant thing. I don't
Totally,
see
yeah.
Mary.
Yeah. Well, that's what I
Uh,
see Mary as, the body of
y-
Christ.
oh, okay,
Is she
okay,
gave
that
body
makes
to
sense.
Christ, and so anytime
Mm.
the congregation comes together, it is Mary, the body.
I actually think there's a passage in Revelation where they talk about the woman that runs into the desert, and then sometimes it's interpreted as Mary, and sometimes it's interpreted as a church. So this has been a long time running that the church and Mary indeed has been.
Cool. Okay, I'm glad you were able to go there with me.
Thank you for taking me there. Now I see
Yes,
it.
yes.
I am in touch with it now.
Yay. I love her. She's like, yeah, I love her. So, all right, God dwells within the development of the community. So that's kind of how I see it too.
The
And
agape, the agape that is not in us, it flows through us, or something like that, he said.
I like how he says here that Hegel is like the Thomas Aquinas of Protestants, which you kind of
Mm.
yeah, revealed a little bit. Hegel takes the machinery of the myth and integrates, restructures Christianity given the scientific revolution and the Reformation. So in that sense, during this time period when the Reformation is happening, when the scientific revolution is happening, Hegel's got to make some sense about his religion. And so
Yeah,
he does so by, yeah, taking that machinery and restructuring it to where it works for philosophy.
yeah. This guy really wrestled with the the Geist of his time, the Tijdgeest, uh, Zeitgeist.
Zeitgeist. It's a
Yeah,
word there was a movie called Zeitgeist that came out.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what Tijdgeest is that. So, and that's what I mean. The whole spirit of the time. Uh, he, this is what happens when you really wrestle with the Zeitgeist. You
Mm-hmm.
you you look into the eyes of God. It's,
Yeah. Wow. I'm gonna let me divert my gaze. Oh, okay, okay. So, all right. Now we move into, because we've kind of foreshadowed this in the last episode too, German idealism was the mass synthesis or the attempt to save that machinery of the axial, sorry, to save the machinery and to salvage the axial revolution, essentially. He says it in more words, but
like this absolute idealism, which is what he calls it, is not a viable option for many people. And I think the reason, because we touched on how this could might be a sensitive thing for some people, because he earlier he focuses on um, Hegel is sure that he's giving a total explanation of all of reality, and is even and this total, I mean, it's in the word, you know, it leads to totalitarian ideologies, and a lot of people then think that, you know, I've got all the answers and I see the whole picture, and that is very dangerous. That is a very dangerous position, and it's fine if you're a nobody, but if you're someone who have influence, people die.
yep,
So
lots of people in this
lots
sense.
of people, lots of people.
Oof.
I, I think there's a lot of in identity politics. I see totalitarianism because it's
Yeah,
either you're on my side or you're against me.
absolutely.
It's not like I can be I we don't have a right to be neutral.
Nope.
As soon as you don't have a right to be neutral about someone's opinions, that's not good.
That's exactly right. Because there's like this idea that you have to always be an ally, which is interesting
Yeah,
because those words were used in that war, the
yeah,
Great War,
yeah.
and or the second one.
No,
And was it also in the
I know it was the Allies against the someone, but that was not
Axis?
used. Yeah, that was not used. The Allies were the good people.
this what you were getting at, what you were alluding to of the totalitarianism, the godfather, he says Hegel is the godfather of totalitarianism. Um, because yeah, there's this whole big understanding, and it's kind of funny because now I understand the total picture or whatever, what's happening here. And he has counter ideas that come up from other people. And so it's just like following the prophecy of exactly what he said was going to happen. So in this way, maybe he did have the total idea. But the
Part
three,
of me objects when you say prophecy, but another part of me is like, that's exactly right, because we spoke about how prophecy is actually seeing patterns and then just saying, okay, these are the patterns, so likely this will happen. That is what, because John always speaks of Old Testament prophecy, like he said, in the Old Testament prophecy way, but there's various different
yep,
prophets and type of prophets in the Old Testament.
yeah,
So there are ones that see visions of the future,
yeah,
and they're yeah, they're ones that completely have the weirdest mystical experiences, which
yeah,
they are ones that's forced to walk around naked or to marry a prostitute or things like that,
yes,
who
yeah.
act out their prophecy. So but probably when he talks of the Old Testament prophets, he means the one that was like working with the king. Um,
Mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm.
those their roles were just to like make sure the king does,
Yeah,
keep on track and does
yeah,
what the acts ethically according to the laws of God.
yes. Which in
Mm.
that sense maybe weren't so ethical back then, but yes. Yeah, okay. So
Someone struggling with Leviticus here, I see.
only a little. Okay. Um all right. All right. So the counter ideas to Hegel uh presented here in three different philosophers. So the
Yes,
first one that he mentions being Schopenhauer,
yes.
who has influence on Nietzsche. I'm interested to hear what you're going to say here. Because there's something missing in each one of these philosophers that he
Yeah.
says.
Well, you can say what's missing, and then I can
Okay.
tell the little
Yeah.
antidote.
So the missing is the connection to will
Mm.
for Schopenhauer. What Hegel is missing in his idea here is that connection with will.
And what I think of when I hear this is that the will was this arbitrary, irrational drive for Schopenhauer. So John doesn't go into this because Hegel moves away from the irrational to the rational, and there's a lot going there. But Schopenhauer hated Hegel. Like John recently told us, and then we Googled to make sure it's true. No, not that we don't trust
Right.
John, but I didn't trust my memory. I didn't trust my memory. That's what I didn't trust. um, that Schopenhauer hated Hegel so much that when I think it's Berlin, when Hegel and Schopenhauer was like 32, like a youngling, which is what we call you guys, the younglings. When he and Hegel taught at the same place for a semester or something, just a course, and he made sure that they scheduled his lectures at exactly the same time as Hegel's, because he, yeah, wanted to boycott him because he thought maybe that he was so awesome that everyone will leave Hegel and come to him, which did not happen.
That's what I
I
was
think
wondering.
Hegel was like this god in his time, like so he had a his inflation was infumed by the people around him as well,
Yeah.
which brings us then to Kierkegaard, because
Yes.
Kierkegaard was also his a big part of what Kierkegaard was writing about was this, like everybody is so Hegelian nowadays because, and like I just know, so he wrote this satirical way, uh, things about Hegel. And I think if I remember correctly from what Chris said in their conversations, that he actually structured some of his the things that he wrote on Hegel's things that Hegel wrote, but then he like made a satire of it. So it was,
Uh,
yeah,
that's interesting. Okay, so then what was missing with Kierkegaard was the ethical self-transcendence. So that idea that Hegel made a system, then sat down beside it. It is almost like
Mm,
making it his queen. And so that's kind of like
mm,
the like you can make satire about the royals, and yeah,
yeah,
that's what I'm sensing from Kierkegaard. There's
yeah,
um lack of perspectival, lack of participatory knowing. It's impersonal.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
cool. That's interesting to
yeah.
make that
And
connection.
I mean, Kierkegaard was very much one of the first existentialist, I think, but then a religious existentialist. So existentialism is about the existence of the self, the participation of the self, of the individual, uh, your own participation with this, whatever this is. So that's what I imagine he meant. Like it's all in here. There's no existence in it. He doesn't live in it. He's just like sitting next to it.
Yeah.
Yes. He's taking the leap of faith. So this book was cool, but it didn't really speak to me. It's a theology book. So I did read about Karl Barth, which is he's a big Protestant theologian, actually. Karl Barth. He's our Aquinas, I think. And so it was nice to recap on my theology, but it didn't speak to me, this book, for some reason. And I mean, it's a recommendation of John, so I'm sure it's good. It's just, it's not, it didn't speak to me. It had no existential relevance. And the thing that John mentions is he says, like, this can be dangerous. And I think he means, like, people can leap into places that they shouldn't, this leap of faith. But he says then he reference, which I think it's recommended for next week or the next episode, is the transformative experiences of L.A. Paul. And it's just like you can't reason your way through transformation. So
Yeah.
reason can't get you through these huge transformations. There's something else required. And then Kierkegaard would say it's a leap of faith.
Yeah. Okay. Because that's what I had written down is you can't reason your way through. You need to take a leap of faith.
Mhm.
And for that self transcendence, like it's just
Yeah.
and that's kind of something we were talking about last time too, is that you can't be rational in the moment, in the leap of faith. Like there's no, or in the, whatever it may be, the container within which you're experiencing this transcendence. You can't be rational in that container. Maybe. Am I using the wrong word? Because rational makes us uncomfortable.
It makes me uncomfortable. It might very well be that you're using the right word, but it makes
Okay.
me uncomfortable because I know John's love of rationality
Yeah, right, right.
and his different ways of saying that rationality shouldn't be deduced to logical. But
Yeah,
in this he says, reason will not get you through
yeah,
because you
yeah,
can't
okay.
reason your way beyond what you can't see.
Right.
So exactly that is what you're saying. In that moment where you make the leap of faith,
Yeah. May
it,
not be
you can't
reasonable.
reason. You
Yeah.
can't reason in that, and that is the because I think it was only a week ago, but it feels like it was for ages ago. We talked about like that in the moment you're just present. You're not thinking
Right.
about the implications of what you're experiencing. You're
Yeah.
only afterwards thinking about it. And
Yeah. We haven't mentioned Marx. So that's another antithesis or counter idea to Hegel. So some of the things that I have written is for Marx, history is driven by monster, socioeconomic. Religion is a projection to distract people from the authoring history. And he thinks that the market is not a distraction. Sorry. As somebody that is now fun employed and no longer involved in the market, I can tell you it's a big fucking distraction.
yeah, that's how shopping is how we distract ourselves, indeed.
Yes.
Um,
So, way to go,
the,
Marx. Sorry.
the way of the isolation is a big thing for Marx. I know from the little knowledge I have of Marx. that we feel isolated. And John used the word, it alienates us from our own role in historical processes. And I mean, I don't see that in Hegel, but it's because I don't know Hegel. Uh, the superficial knowledge of Hegel, I can very much see how I can participate, how any human being can participate in it. But we need to feel that we are participating, otherwise we feel alienated from this process of
Yeah.
historical development. And that's and because we are God is this projection of the ideal human, and all of our, like, God makes history run. So all of our own responsibility we're projecting on him. So it alienates us from our own role, our own responsibility, and that is what Marx says. No, no, that's not good. Yeah,
Right.
through Feuerbach, the fire stream.
Yeah. Fire stream. Could you elaborate on that a little bit too? Because he sat on that for a second.
Oh, he just likes the name. Feuerbach means fire stream. In yeah, uh, and then he has this quote from Marx, which I think is an awesome quote. To understand me, you have to go through the fire stream of Feuerbach. Like, I want to read Feuerbach and be influenced by him just so that I can say that.
Yeah. Go ahead.
What he means with history is driven by the monster, he refers to that Platonic, not the man, which is reason. So again, he's objecting to this, the reason driving us, but the irrational, the appetite part, the monster that is driving history, because we're consuming, and the market is our consumption
Mm.
um, uh, trends, and
Mm.
that is what drives the unfolding of history, how we fulfill and chase the fulfillment of our appetites. So
Oof.
it's the materialism, it's dialectical materialism and not dialectical idealism. Like I said, um, that I know people who really dislike Marx, and because they really dislike Marx, they really dislike Hegel, because they say Hegel gave him the what the firepower,
Yeah.
and then they will say Marx just turned Hegel upside down. He he um, he took the ideal into the material.
Mm. Okay. Yeah, it slowly connects for me. Like,
Okay, I'm gonna say, so what the sense what Marx says we need to do is to sense the course of history, sense the kairos, which is things that we are also said like we need to do.
mhm.
But for him, the idea of, because kairos comes from the New Testament, where Jesus was the kairos, the Christ was the kairos. So I wrote here, the crucifixion became revolution,
Mm.
because Marx says the way to participate in history is to take up arms, to fight. So he's calling for violence. So I would think that the higher integration would be something calling people to participate in the unfolding of history, to participate in this, the sense the course of history and
Mm.
sense the kairos and act, but not crucifixion, revolution. What would be the third? Because crucifixion is self-sacrifice.
Yeah.
Revolution is,
Sacrifice on behalf
well,
of the whole.
both are sacrifice for the sake of the whole, actually.
Yeah. One is okay, like the way that I look at Christ is like that idea of forgiveness,
Hmm.
and then moving into the revolution, it's not forgiveness. It's almost like the
Exactly.
opposite of forgiveness.
Revolt. What I there's sin connected to the crucifixion, because of the sins of humanity. Christ had to sacrifice, and it feels like almost there's guilt or something, or blame with the revolt, with the
Blame.
revolutions, because it's for what you did wrong. I would rectify against I would rectify for your sake. That's what the Christ message is.
Yeah.
The revolution message is for what you did wrong, I would rectify for my sake and for my kind's sake, because that's the
Mm,
same. Me and my kind, it's the same feeling.
okay.
Um, so,
So there's an and here.
oh yeah, because that's what we said. So what you did wrong, I would rectify for your sake and for my sake. So the whole, I
The
would
whole,
rectify for the sake of the whole.
which is a religion that's not a religion.
Yeah.
Okay, so we found out the the higher synthesis of this, the higher idea. Yeah. Agape or
Mm,
returning non-love with love.
yeah. Feels like agape is the answer to everything.
Imagine that. All you need is love.
It's
Love.
love is all you need.
So there was another John. Okay, that was fun. I like that one. It was way more fun to review it than it was to go through it. Is that like how it is? We have a higher integration. It's more fun this way.
Yes. Yeah.
Ah, cool. Well, do you have anything to take us out with, or
Oh, I do, from this awesome book, Thinking Being, Introduction to Metaphysics in the Classical Tradition by Eric D. Pohl. Just a quote that I made a love, and I don't even know if it relates to this, but I loved it, and so I'm going to read it. And it was about the cave, and I thought, like, we keep returning to the cave, so why not? In the cave parable, after remarking that the prisoners are like us, Socrates asks, do you suppose that they see anything of themselves and each other except the shadows cast by the fire on the cave wall in front of them? The prisoners see not only the shadows of the puppets, but also shadows of themselves, and take these for their true selves. The implication of this is that to turn around and ascend out of the cave, to come to know intelligible reality rather than merely sensible appearance, is also to return to oneself, to come to know the true self, the divinity within. As in the myth of recollection, knowledge of reality coincides with self-knowledge.
okay? Well, the next one is the halfway point. So I'm
Yes.
super excited. We're coming up on a milestone here. Big 25. It was a good year. Yes, and then until next time, we will be spreading love.
I'm going to spread some love.
Hey.